There's a drawer in almost every Australian household that tells a story no one asked to hear. A kitchen drawer, a toolbox in the shed, a tackle compartment in a ute parked outside a servo on the Pacific Highway. Open it, pick up the first knife, turn it over, find the stamp, the small etched text near the ricasso just above the handle where the manufacturer pressed its origin into the steel before it left the factory floor. Read it. Made in China. Put it down. Pick up the next one. This one carries a name the owner has known for 20 years, a name his father mentioned, a name sold at Bunnings and BCF and every outdoor shop from Cairns to Albany. Turn it over. Read the stamp. Made in China. There is a 90% chance that the knife in your pocket right now, the one you carry to work, the one you use to cut baling twine or open feed bags or trim a branch on the fire trail behind your property, was manufactured in a facility you have never seen, in a province you cannot name, by hands you will never meet. The name on the blade was kept alive for one reason. It still sounds like home. The conventional wisdom has always been simple. Buy a name you trust. Your old man used it. The bloke at the counter recommends it. The packaging says Australian. The logo has a kangaroo or a map outline or the word Outback in a font designed to suggest red dirt and campfire smoke. The conventional wisdom is exactly what hollowed the industry out. The trust was the mechanism. Consumers believed the name. Manufacturers understood this. And when the cost equation shifted, when it became possible to produce the same physical object for 1/5 the price on the other side of the planet, the name stayed and the factory left. No announcement, no recall notice, no apology. Just a quiet edit on the stamp, moved to a place most buyers never think to look, and a slow replacement of the steel, the tempering, the fit, and the finish, while the brand on the box remained identical. The cure is not more trust. The cure is the opposite. Stop reading the box, start reading the stamp. This is the story of how Australia lost an entire manufacturing sector in less than 2 decades, and the 3 operations, not 300, not 30, 3, that refused to leave. Open a drawer in a house in suburban Brisbane, a Federation-era Queenslander in Annerley, weatherboard, tin roof, the kind of place where a retired electrician keeps his tools organized by decade. The drawer beside the fridge. Inside, a Victorinox bought at David Jones in 1998, still sharp. A fillet knife from BCF with a rubberized handle that started peeling 18 months after purchase. A folding knife branded with a name that sounds like it belongs to a station property in western New South Wales, something with creek or ridge in it, bought at a Bunnings in Toowoomba for $49. Every single one, except the Swiss, was manufactured in Yangjiang, Guangdong province. Yangjiang is a city of 2.5 million people on the southern coast of China. It produces approximately 60% of the world's metal blade products. Scissors, kitchen knives, pocket knives, hunting knives, cleavers, razors. The city has been doing this since the Ming Dynasty. The factories are vast, efficient, and operate at a cost basis that no workshop in the southern hemisphere can approach. There is nothing inherently wrong with a knife made in Yangjiang. Some of them are competent. The problem is not where they are made. The problem is what they are called when they arrive. Walk into any Bunnings warehouse in Australia. Find the knife section, count the brands, now turn each one over, read the stamps. What you're holding is an imported product wearing a domestic costume. The brand name, the packaging design, the copy on the cardboard insert, all of it engineered to suggest local origin without legally claiming it. The phrase Australian-owned does most of the heavy lifting. It means the company is registered in Australia. It means the director has an ABN. It does not mean anyone in Australia touched the steel. Designed in Australia is the other phrase. It means someone in a Sydney or Melbourne office chose the blade profile from a supplier catalog and sent a purchase order to Guangdong. The knife was never designed, it was selected. There is a legal distinction between Australian-made and Australian-owned, and the entire imported knife industry in this country operates inside the gap between those two phrases, in a gray zone wide enough to drive a shipping container through. This was not always the case. Australia once had a cutlery industry, not a large one, nothing to rival Sheffield or Solingen or Seki, but a functioning network of small manufacturers, toolmakers, and bladesmiths scattered through the industrial belts of Adelaide, Melbourne, Sydney, and a handful of regional towns. Colonial-era settlers, many of them trained in Sheffield, brought their forge skills to the new colony and began producing bladeware from imported steel. By Federation in 1901, Australia had a small but self-sustaining cutlery sector, driven by the same impulse that built the rest of its early manufacturing base: distance. It was cheaper to make it here than to wait 6 months for a ship. 2 world wars accelerated the process. Military contracts for bayonets, utility knives, mess kits, and field tools created a domestic supply chain that employed hundreds of skilled tradespeople in heat treatment, grinding, handle fitting, and finishing. After 1945, several of these operations transitioned into civilian production. For 3 decades, in the 1950s through the 70s, Australia made knives. Not many, not famous ones, But real knives, forged and ground and assembled by people who lived in the same towns where the products were sold, then the architecture changed. The story of what happened to Australian knife manufacturing is not unique. It is a specific instance of a pattern that repeated across every Western economy between 1980 and 2010. Tariff reduction, trade liberalization, the progressive removal of protections that had allowed small domestic manufacturers to survive despite higher labor costs, higher material costs, and lower volumes. In Australia, the Hawke and Keating governments of the 1980s and 90s systematically reduced import tariffs as part of a broader economic reform program. The logic was sound in macroeconomic terms. Cheaper imports would lower consumer prices, force domestic industry to become competitive, and redirect capital towards sectors where Australia had a genuine comparative advantage: mining, agriculture, services. The logic was also, for anyone who made things with their hands in a workshop in regional Australia, a death sentence delivered in the language of policy papers. But the tariff cuts were a slow bleed. The killing blow had a specific date: December the 11th, 2001, China's formal accession to the World Trade Organization, the event that rewrote the cost equation for every manufacturer of physical goods in every Western country simultaneously. Before WTO accession, Chinese exports faced variable tariffs, quotas, and trade barriers that limited their penetration into markets like Australia. After accession, those barriers fell. The wholesale price of imported metal goods, cutlery, hand tools, hardware, fasteners, dropped by margins that made domestic production not merely uncompetitive, but physically impossible. An Australian workshop paying Australian wages, Australian electricity costs, Australian steel prices, Australian workers' compensation premiums, and Australian rent could not produce a folding knife for less than $35 to $40 at wholesale. A Yangjiang factory operating at scale could land the same product in an Australian port for $4. Not a comparable product, the same product, same steel grade, same blade geometry, same handle material. $4, freight included. The retailers did what retailers do. Bunnings, Kmart, Big W, BCF, Anaconda, every major chain that carried knives began applying procurement pressure on their domestic suppliers. Match the price, find efficiencies, reduce your margin. The domestic suppliers could not match the price. The maths did not work. Some tried. They moved to cheaper premises, reduced staff, switched to lower grade steel, simplified their designs, cut their marketing. It was not enough. The gap was not 10% or 20%. The gap was 80%. You cannot close an 80% cost gap with efficiency improvements. You close it by moving your production to the place where the gap originates, or you close your doors. Most closed their doors. The closures happened quietly, over a decade and a half, in towns and industrial suburbs that do not make the evening news. A grinding shop in Marrickville that had operated since 1962, shut in 2004. A family-owned cutlery operation in Adelaide's western suburbs, 3 generations, gone by 2007. A toolmaker in Wagga Wagga, who had supplied pocket knives to rural retailers for 28 years, ceased trading in 2011. No headlines, no parliamentary inquiries, no public mourning. Just the particular silence of a loading dock with weeds growing through the concrete, and a roller door that nobody opens anymore, and 80 people who once clocked on at 7 in the morning now working at the meatworks or the council or not working at all. By 2015, the number of commercial-scale knife manufacturers operating on Australian soil had fallen to a figure you could count without using all the fingers on one hand. If you have watched this far, if you're the bloke who bought 3 knives in the last decade from brands that sounded Australian, and is now starting to suspect not one of them was made within 10,000 kilometers of Bourke, then you already know what this is about. You're tired of being lied to by packaging. You're tired of reading the word Outback on a product that has never been west of the Great Dividing Range. In the pinned comment below this video, there's a document. It lists every currently operating Australian knife manufacturer, what they make, where they are located, what steel they use, the exact stamps to look for, no affiliate links, no discount codes, no upsell. Just the information you should have been handed 20 years ago before the drawer filled up with strangers, the 3 who stayed. In the village of Tharwa, 20 minutes south of Canberra, on a rural property where the paddocks run down to the Murrumbidgee, there is a forge, Tharwa Valley Forge. It was established in 2003 by Kareem Haddad, a bladesmith trained in the early 1990s by Thomas Gurner, Australia's first accredited master bladesmith. The timing is important. Haddad opened his forge 2 years after China's WTO accession, at the exact moment every rational economic signal was telling anyone in Australian manufacturing to get out. He did not get out. He walked in the opposite direction. The forge sits on the property like something from a previous century, stone and corrugated iron. Inside, the air carries the particular smell of a working smithy, quenching oil, grinding dust, the faint ozone tang of heated steel. Haddad and his team forge every knife from raw steel. Not assembled, not finished from pre-cut blanks, forged. The steel is heated in a gas forge until it reaches critical temperature, somewhere between 900 and 1100 degrees Celsius, depending on the alloy, then drawn out under a power hammer, shaped on the anvil, normalized, hardened, tempered, ground on a belt grinder that runs 60 hours a week, and fitted with a handle made from stabilized Australian timbers or synthetic composites. Each knife takes between 8 and 20 hours of direct labor. The forge produces a few hundred knives a year. A single Yangjiang factory produces that many in a shift. Haddad does not talk about the economics with any enthusiasm. He runs courses, bladesmithing, blacksmithing, leatherwork, that subsidize the production side. More than 4,000 students have passed through since 2003. The courses keep the lights on. The knives keep the purpose. The margin on a handmade knife sold direct is survivable. The margin on a handmade knife sold through a retailer, after the retailer takes 40 to 50%, is a theological question. Tharwa Valley Forge sells direct, mostly online, occasionally at markets and shows. It is not a business model that will scale. It is a business model that will continue, which is a different thing, and in the Australian manufacturing context of 2026, a rarer one. 1,200 kilometers south, across Bass Strait in Tasmania, Tassie Tiger Knives operates from a workshop that smells of grinding compound and machine oil. The company was established in 2017 by a hunter and fisherman who had spent 30 years in the field and grown tired of carrying blades that failed in the conditions they were supposedly designed for. The founding premise was simple and blunt. Make a knife that works in the Australian bush, test it with people who actually use knives in the Australian bush, and manufacture it on Australian soil where you can control every step from steel selection to final edge geometry. Tassie Tiger runs a different model to Tharwa Valley. It is production-oriented. Fixed blade hunting knives, fillet knives, folding knives, camp knives, designed for the commercial retail market. Every blade is professionally heat-treated in-house. The steels are selected for the specific application. High carbon for edge retention on hunting blades, stainless for corrosion resistance on fillet knives used in salt water. The handles are fitted by hand. The grinds are done by workers who understand that a convex grind on a skinning knife behaves differently in cold, wet fat than a flat grind, and that the difference matters at 4 in the morning on a ridge in the western tiers with a fallow deer on the ground and no torch. The cost of this is visible in the price tag. A Tassie Tiger fixed blade retails for between $150 and $300. The imported equivalent, the knife with the Australian-sounding name and the Yangjiang stamp, retails for $49. The difference is not packaging. The difference is steel quality, heat treatment precision, grind consistency, handle fit, and the fact that if the blade fails, the person who made it lives in the same country as the person who bought it. That accountability is not sentimental. It is structural. It is the difference between a manufacturer and a label. In a back street in Collingwood, the inner Melbourne suburb where the gentrification sits uneasily beside the industrial residue, where a warehouse selling $6 flat whites operates next door to a panel beater who has been there since 1978, there is a workshop at 25 Easy Street. 13 knives. The door is unmarked. Inside, the light is fluorescent and the sound is steel on stone. The maker is Bud Heiser. He is American-born, grew up in Kentucky, learned blacksmithing from his father, arrived in Melbourne and found his way to knife making through furniture work and a book published in 1906 called The Farm Blacksmith's Handbook. His pedigree is 3 generations of metalwork. His output is slow. Each knife takes between 40 and 50 hours. He starts with a block of steel, heats it, beats it into shape by hand, hardens it, tempers it, finishes the blade, and then builds the handle. The process has not changed meaningfully since his grandfather did the same work in the American South. What has changed is the context. Heiser makes knives in a country where the industrial infrastructure that once supported this kind of work, the supply chains, the specialist steel distributors, the tooling suppliers, the apprenticeship pipelines, has largely been dismantled. He sources his steel individually. He maintains his own equipment. He works alone or with one assistant in a space that could fit inside the break room of a Yangjiang blade factory. 13 Knives does not advertise. It does not wholesale to chains. It operates on custom orders and word of mouth, selling to chefs, hunters, collectors, and the particular kind of buyer who has learned, through years of disappointment, that the name on the box means nothing, and the hand behind the blade means everything. The waiting list is long, the output is small, the workshop is not growing. It is persisting, which, in Collingwood in 2026, surrounded by co-working spaces and kombucha bars, is its own form of resistance. 3 operations, 3 workshops, a forge south of Canberra, a production facility in Tasmania, a one-man shop in inner Melbourne. Between them, they employ fewer people than a single mid-size cafe franchise. Their combined annual output would fill a fraction of 1 shipping container from Yangjiang. They are not the beginning of a resurgence. Australia is not getting its knife industry back. The cost structures, the supply chains, the retail expectations, the consumer price anchoring, none of it supports a return to domestic production at any meaningful scale. The factories that closed in Marrickville and Adelaide and Wagga Wagga are not reopening. The tradespeople who ran them have retired or retrained or died. The apprenticeships that fed them stopped being offered 15 years ago. The institutional knowledge, the particular understanding of how carbon steel behaves at 960 degrees in a specific forge with a specific airflow, the muscle memory of holding a blade against a grinding belt at the precise angle that produces a working edge without burning the temper. That knowledge is not stored in a database. It lives in hands, and when the hands stop, it disappears. What remains is not an industry. It is an act of reading. The stamp, the small etched text near the base of the blade, pressed into the steel before the knife left the last pair of hands that touched it. It is the only piece of information on the entire product that is legally required to be accurate. The brand name can suggest anything. The packaging can imply anything. The country of origin stamp cannot lie. It is regulated. It is audited. It is the one surface on the knife where the manufacturer is forced to tell the truth. Pick up the knife in your drawer, the one you bought at Bunnings, the one with the name that sounds like a cattle station. Turn it over, find the stamp, read it. Now you know something you did not know before. Not something dramatic, not something that changes the world, something small and specific, where the object in your hand was actually made, and whether the name on the blade has any relationship to the truth. That is all this is. Not a movement, not a crusade, not a campaign to save an industry that the economics will not support. Just the act of reading what is already written in small letters on the steel you're holding. The information was always there. It was just never the part anyone told you to look at. The next time you buy a knife, for the shed, for the tackle box, for the kitchen, for the glove box, do one thing differently. Before you read the brand, before you read the price, before you read the copy on the packaging that tells you about heritage and tradition and rugged Australian something, turn the blade over, find the stamp, read it first. That is where the truth has been, the entire time, pressed into the metal, waiting for someone to look.